City Archivist Jeff O'Brien is with us today and going to talk a little bit about what's happened with the archives and where they've moved to and from. Thanks for coming to the studio, Jeff.
Well, thank you for having me.
Want to talk about you and your role. I know you're a famous celebrity across town with the knowledge that's imparted on you with everything that you've done in keeping our city archives accessible, clean, and up to date. What's happened recently?
Okay, well, the big news of the City Archives is that we moved. So the City of Saskatoon Archives was actually established in the 1980s. And originally it was a contract held by the provincial archives. City contracted with the provincial archives. Anyway, we haven't been that way in a long time. We ran our own archive since the 1990s, but we bounced around to a bunch of different sort of temporary locations. And so the last move, in 2010, we moved out actually close to here, down on Cardinal Crescent, in a commercial lease. And we were supposed to be there for 5 years, and of course that stretched to a lot longer than 5 years. So finally, you know that the old post office building has been a city building since about 2014. And the main floor was all commercial leases. And those people moved out. And so suddenly there's a big chunk of space available, and somebody said, "Hey, do you want this for the archives?" And I'm like, "Hey, yes, I do." And so that was the project. And so they had to gut that area, they had to renovate it, get it up to specs, so that we could have a good, the proper kind of public facility, the proper office and workshops, and most importantly, the right kind of stack space. So it climatically controlled and enough room for the collection and for expansion. And so we closed the archives last year in February, and we basically had to rip everything down, take down all our shelves. We moved, 3,500 boxes.
Wow.
Most of which I carried at least once, and some of them lots of times. We had to take down all our shelving, get everything up on pallets. And then we had a nice moving company come, and they moved everything over to the 3 days. Over 3 days, they moved 95 pallets worth of stuff into our new space, and then we had to put it all back together again. And it's like, okay, so there's this, our stack area is a big kind of rectangular room, and it's all pallets. I call it the pallet farm. And to get from anywhere to anywhere, we had to kind of get really skinny and kind of slip between the spaces between the pallets. And so we're unloading pallets, and building shelves. So we built some shelves, and then we unload pallets to load the shelves, and then we built some more shelves, gradually kind of working our way back across the room. It was an immense amount of effort, mostly me and my associate Ken at work. A couple of the staff from records management came down and helped us out, and we're literally bucket chaining boxes over our heads to try to get between the, because maybe the pallets are over here and the shelves are over there. Anyway, it was an adventure. We're still not completely done. But we have been open since July. We kind of soft open because we can't really close, right? It's a public institution. People call us because they need information, and that's members of the public and members of the civic administration. When the solicitor's office calls and says, "We need this thing," they mean they need it now. And so it doesn't matter what's going on, we have to find it. And so it really was a push to get everything back on the shelves and get it in order.
How does that work with, I get trying to figure out all those boxes, but how many pieces and artifacts would you have to manage? Is there a number that?
You mean physical numbers of things?
I guess.
Because, a box is just an enclosure. Mm-hmm. Okay, here's what it looks like. If you were to take every piece of paper, at everything at the City Archives and pile it one atop the other, you would have a stack the height of a 400-story building. So we currently have about 4,000 linear feet of records at the City Archives. And this is a small municipal archives in a little city in the middle of the prairies. You can imagine the kinds of, you extrapolate that across Canada, throughout the world, the sizes of collections we're talking about. And some of that's digital, of course. We digitize for people. If people come and says, "I need a picture," we don't make prints anymore. Right? Back in the olden days, we would send it off. We would send a negative off to a photography shop, and they would make us a print, and then we would charge you for it. Nowadays, when you want a picture from us, we scan it, right? And we don't photocopy anymore. You want a copy of a document, a letter from a collection, you can take a picture of it. So it does save wear and tear in the collection.
And the responsibility of the archives is not necessarily just photographs. There could be minutes and things of that nature from City Hall.
Everything. City Archives is the archives of the corporation of the City of Saskatoon. Mostly that's the city clerk's office, because the city clerk is the secretary of council. And so every decision that council makes is documented by city clerks. And every time council makes a decision, there's a connection between council and administration, right? Because administration does what council orders, but the conduit through which all that goes is city clerk's office. So if you're trying to document the actions of the city government, then the city clerk's office is the place to start. But we also have records of the city commissioner's office, which is the administrative head of the city, and tons of other, I mean, more than I can name. But we also have private records, like non-government records, records of corporations and businesses, organizations, interesting individuals, guys like Bob Fink. You remember Bob Fink?
Yes.
Right? An activist, an artist, a philosopher, a poet, a journalist, and a fascinating collection. Don Cossack, who's been involved in every single kind of left-wing cause that ever happened from about 1973 to the present. I was just talking to Don today. He donated a substantial collection to us some years ago that we're still kind of chewing our way through. Those are just a couple. Tons of photograph collections. The Star Phoenix collection. That's our biggest single collection, is the Star Phoenix collection. So, and that consists of the Star Phoenix photograph collection, which was originally held by the provincial archives, so it goes from about 1946 to 1999, and so they, when the provincial archives had a Saskatoon office, they closed and they gave us their Star Phoenix collection. That's 400,000 photographic negatives. It's an immense and amazing collection. And then just before Christmas, we acquired the rest of the Star Phoenix collection, which was a whole bunch, boxes and boxes more photographs, and but also they're bound copies, right? So the Star Phoenix, every month they send copies of the newspaper off to a print shop to get bound, and then in these great big huge books, right? You imagine a book is the size of a newspaper,
yeah.
And so they have those going back to 1911, and they were all in a big room downstairs at the Star Phoenix building. And of course, you know that the Star Phoenix building was closed in 2023 and then sold this year. And so I got a call from the Star Phoenix like let's say December 7th, and they said, yeah, you can have that stuff. It needs to be out of the building by the 15th. So we're like talking about lighting a fire well, anyway, you know where. So we put the boots to it, and me and Ken and the ladies from Records Management, we went and we packed all those bound volumes up, and we tagged their clipping collections and square photographs all over the place, and subject files and all this stuff, and their microfilm. We packed it all up in boxes and got it on pallets, 45 pallets of stuff, and now we're still putting it on shelves. So it's been a crazy mother of a year, let me just tell you.
I can't imagine the depth of all that, and I guess that leads me to a little bit of the history that I've done researching through the public library local history room. What is the difference between the archives and the local history room at the main library?
Well, that's complicated. The local history room's primary focus is photographs and community, right? So that is, the local history room was established very early, 1966, and it is sort of the archives of the community of Saskatoon. Or it's a library special collection specifically, but it and their main focus is photographs, and like I say, they acquire photographs that sort of show the community of Saskatoon as it grows and changes over the years. Our principal focus is the city of Saskatoon and the civic administration, but there's all sorts of bleed over, right? The library recently acquired a very large collection of blueprints from a local architect, very busy local architect. And so they've got a huge collection that relates to buildings in Saskatoon. Well, we have a collection that relates to buildings in Saskatoon, but ours are the city records. And so there are subtle differences between the two. But there's lots of bleed over between our mandates. But it's okay, because it kind of spreads the work around, and it allows sort of a diversity of viewpoint in working with history and historic records, and we're close together now. Back when we were up at Cardinal Crescent, you know, if they said, well, Archives has some stuff that relates to this, and people at the library would go, yeah, I don't want to drive halfway across town to go to the Archives. Now we're a block apart. And so because we share a constituency and we share a duty, which is to document the history of the city, then we're actually in a place where our complementary collections can actually complement each other from a research perspective.
So does that mean that the route at the end of all this was from the provincial archives that gave birth to the Civic? Like there was a period of time that you didn't exist?
Oh, totally. I mean, the city has always managed its own records, except for a very short time when we contracted to the provincial archives. And that comes out because in 1979, these two guys, two profs from the U of S, Stan Hansen and Don Kerr, decided they wanted to write a history of Saskatoon for the 1982 centennial. And they went to the city and said, we want access to city records. And so the city decided the easiest way to do that would be to give them to the province. And so let the province manage them and let these guys work at it there. And it was the way to do it. But it was the way to do it then. Now the way to do it, and I think the proper way, is to manage our own records in-house as part of the civic administration. And that's something else nice about being downtown at the old post office. It's a city building. So when the furnace stops working, I don't have to call a furnace guy. I just get on the email and I email the building guy and somebody shows up, right, and fixes it. Yeah. And it's nice. It's like a little bit like being home. You know?
So your success has led to an event coming up in early February.
Right.
Shed us a little bit of information on that.
We are finally having our official dedication ceremony. And not only that, we're doing an Archives Week event. So, okay, the first week in February is Archives Week, right? Mm-hmm. So we, the City Archives, and all the other sort of heritage institutions in Saskatoon will be at the Heritage Festival at the Western Development Museum, and that's Sunday. So not this Sunday, but next Sunday. Mm-hmm. That must be the first, right? Okay, let's say it's the first.
February 2nd would be the Sunday.
But Sunday's the 2nd.
Yes.
That's right, because, that's right, so it's February 2nd is a Sunday. That's Heritage Festival.
Yes.
That'll be good. But the 4th, the Tuesday, is our dedication ceremony, our grand opening. So we're going to have tours of the archives from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. So you come to the archives and we'll show you around. We have the bell that used to be the bell for the HMC of Saskatoon hanging up in the archives. And so if you're lucky, you come on a tour, we'll let you ring our bell. And then we have an event starting in the basement, which is the jazz club in the basement of the post office building. And that's at 7:15. We'll be on stage. We're going to have the mayor, Cynthia Block, is going to be there. And she is going to bring greetings from the city, and she's going to officially dedicate our archives, which is absolutely cool. And then we're going to have different readings from the archives, some letters and a couple of movies and things like that, showcasing the archives and showcasing history in Saskatoon. Some of it, and it'll be interesting. I know I kind of say that out loud, and it's like, oh yeah, that'll be fun. Or I could stay home and watch paint dry. But I have to tell you, we do this event every year, and it is fun. Terry Hockness, you know, Terry Hockness is a local musician of amazing repute, and also a local historian and heritage advocate, and he is going to be on stage playing a piano, Terry Hockness, and that will be a treat. I'm going to be there. Rob McDonald from CTV was a co-anchor at CTV for years and years, and a friend of mine is going to be our master of ceremonies. So that is at the basement and the Jazz Club in the basement of the old post office building, 202 4th Avenue North, and that'll start at 7:15 on the 4th. And it's free, and the kitchen will be open, and the bar will be open, and we're going to have a great time.
Too easy.
That's right.
I want to thank you for all the work you've done and are doing. We'll see you on the 4th, and thank you for coming to the studio.
Well, thank you for having me at the studio. It's always a pleasure.
That's our show for today. I'd like to thank our guest, Dean Bilodeau, as well as Jeff O'Brien. I'm your host, Randy Shabilo. We'll see you next time on Connect.